My man, you're good looking, got drip, good shot with a gun, and rocking the fedora like MJ. Smooth criminal. Can we get a hee? Hee. All right, I don't know.
Yeah.
But you decide to settle for a OF Muppet. Why are you talking shit about my homie Kate?
I didn't do OF when we met. We decided to go into that together.
that is a good
and where do you
point.
think the drip came from? Hello?
But I mean,
You think you had this before?
but isn't that objectively worse in a way?
No, he's not settling for like an OF Muppet or whatever. It was more of like a. It was more of going into a business opportunity together.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, wouldn't that in a way be where like if you had a wife and she wasn't engaged in prostitution and then you engaged with her in prostitution, I consider OF to be.
Where's the prostitution?
I consider it prostitution.
Oh.
It's selling sex.
Okay, well, I can consider anything to be a label.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
Yeah, but I think that there. Well, look, I'm just telling you how I consider it. I
Okay.
consider it prostitution. I think that sex works broadly falls under the category of prostitution. But if that's the case, it's like if your wife wasn't engaged in prostitution, then was, right? How that seems to me even more objectively worse than if she was a prostitute and then maybe later she wasn't or whatever. That almost seems objectively worse. Like almost. You allowed the corruption to happen type of thing. I think that that's the intent of the chat anyway.
well, I think the part I think that I focus on is like the settle. And so it's like, yeah, I think anytime you feel like you're settling, that's like probably something you should, consider again. But like, that's the presupposition being made, right? Because if it's not settling and I'm okay with it, then what's the issue, I guess?
Well,
like it's our marriage, not
That's
if he doesn't want that.
That's true. But I think from at least if you look at the social categories of morality, if you're talking about, in this case, prostitution, that's usually going to be in one of the lower categories of morality. I'm going to consider that low on the moral scale for work or whatever it is that you're doing. So if that's the case, if you're like, well, this person was not engaging in that immoral behavior before, and with you now they are. They'd almost think like you assisted in the immoral behavior. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, or at least I just didn't weigh in strongly against enough.
Right.
I guess would be the thing. I mean, it started off as like kind of a compliment, and then it went to like, why'd you settle for this person? So it feels like he's just wanting to attack her because I don't think any of that characterization is particularly true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's commonplace for especially the Christian right to be pretty heavily against OnlyFans work and prostitution because they consider it categorized the same exact way. Mm-hmm. And so if that's the case, like that's part of their pushback in society is they don't want the normalization of it. That's the whole goal, right?
No, I agree. I think it's terrible for like a normal circumstance. Most girls who do OF, they will not succeed and they just ruin any kind of social dynamic they would have had with a potential partner or like a workplace or anything. I think most of the time it's not good. I think the difference with us was we already had each other. We already were in a good financial spot before even starting social media in general, as most probably should be.
But the criticism that you would hear most often there, because I've heard this a lot, right? Mm-hmm. Like there are OF or sex workers or prostitutes who will come on the show and discuss their, kind of like the inner workings and dynamics. And what I've noted is there are some who will say like, look, I'm a success story. And that is true. Like almost nobody's going to succeed at OF. That's true. Almost nobody's going to succeed as a podcaster, and almost nobody's going to succeed as a great welder either. Okay, like it's really hard to succeed as one of the kind of like cream of the crop. You probably know this from IFBB. There's lots of people around who are really strong and really buff, but they just never get anywhere. It's like most of them, right? And the cream rises to the top, as they say. But I would just point this out that one of the big criticisms that comes when sex workers say that is that they're just trying to pull the ladder up. So the idea is like, hey, it actually behooves me to say not to engage when you're 20 years, or not in your case 20 years, but like 10 years younger in sex work because now you become a competition, right? So you're pulling the ladder up by saying, well, you couldn't be successful at it either. That would be the other criticism back.
Sure, I've heard that. And I can definitely see that perspective, but it actually is just very unlikely just because of how saturated the market already is.
I'm just giving you the
Yeah,
criticism, but I actually do agree with you that it's like, extremely unlikely that that most women will succeed at it, and it's just baffling to me why so many still go into it.
But I think another point to Mr. Wilson's point is that with you, remind me your name again.
Nick.
Nick. Okay, Nick. You've obviously protected Kate physically from physical harm and fended that off successfully. However, I think one of his points he was trying to make is that since you two started to date, it progressed, and you both made the decision to start OnlyFans. However, did you do that with full consciousness that of the ramifications, like mental, spiritual ramifications that can affect a woman? That's, you know, just you got in at a brilliant time with Twitch, and that truly did send you off on a rocket ship. But that illustriousness comes at a cost. There's like things. It comes at a cost, yeah.
I think that I would have felt more strongly about that if I was thinking of ever actually making real content like penetration, or even like just doing scenes with other men, right? Because it was mostly solo and it's toys and it's not even real. It feels more like smoke and mirrors for profit. It feels more like acting to me than it does actual sex work, even though it clearly falls under the illusion of sex.
Yeah,
know?
you're selling your body.
Right.
In the end, that's the difference between actresses that star in big films and porn stars. It's that one's selling their body, the other ones are selling a story or a film or a product or a lingerie suite even. But it still begs the question, by engaging in explicit content creation, you almost you were taken hostage. Okay, like it would. Wait, was I wrong? Did I miss the story? I thought you were taken hostage in your own home, Miss Katie.
Not from the sex work.
Yeah, that was like, I'm assuming they assumed, I mean, I don't know where they attributed the crypto coming from, but it wasn't actually that. We'd done, you know, like obviously she had the kick deal, and this, you know, stake is sometimes a component, and so all of that is just very crypto oriented.
Yeah, that's from. It was from live
Oh,
streaming,
yeah.
like live streaming articles. It wasn't an article about OF or anything.
Oh, okay. So I was attributing the fame there towards that.
No, I would say that mostly came from Twitch, not even like OF really.
It came from. How can you say that?
Because I streamed on Twitch for like over 12 hours for several years, like every day.
Yeah, like at one point during her peak, like we have some, I guess, closeness with some people who work with like XQC, and I was like stunned because at one point in like 21 and 22, she had more unique people coming into her stream a day. The difference is that they stayed like a minute, you know, whereas XQC had them stay an average of 50 minutes, right? And he was streaming to like hundreds of thousands of people, and then she had like 10,000. It's like her stream became a place where people checked in, and like it was like just a huge exposure generator, like, you know, over 100 to 300 million impressions monthly just from that site alone. And so it's definitely the fame, but like, not to sterilize it too much, but like for us, if you want to tell the actual story, it goes like, Patreon didn't start off as a you know, sexy site, and neither did OnlyFans.
Or Twitch.
Yeah,
Or Twitch for
yeah,
that
they're both
matter.
musician sites, right? And so for Patreon, it was like, oh, okay, so you can sell some photos just like how cosplay people sell prints. Cool, right? And then when OnlyFans rolled around, it was literally, wait, that's a bigger platform with more users, and so we're going to do what we do now on Patreon on OnlyFans. And then like maybe within the next year, it became the porn star site.
I hear you, but let's talk about the genesis of Amouranth, where it started off as a Twitch stream, and what happened? Progressively, did it become more scantily clad? Did it get more promiscuous? Did you start cosplaying more sexy costumes, and then it became less of an art and more of like, hey, look at my appearance?
I actually think that a lot of my bikini streams were my most artistic moments, because I would dress up as a pigeon, and I would, flap as I licked microphones and laugh to the bank. So I would say that's pretty powerful art. I'm pretty happy with it.
So moving off that, though, I want, since Andrew's back at the table, there was a moment there where there was some disagreement about the categorization of the term used, prostitution. Willow, in your notes here, you write, you had a disagreement with Andrew calling sex workers prostitutes because, and you write, sex workers have far more rights and access to their money. Prostitutes are more human trafficked. Do you want to elaborate a bit?
Yeah, I've actually been waiting for this moment because I watch you guys a lot, and
Okay. This is more so Andrew's argument.
Okay.
It's your moment.
I know I'm
It's
ready,
your
Andrew. I'm ready.
Get me a
So-
beer for her moment. I got it.
This
Here we
comes
go.
mainly because I am also focused on starting a nonprofit, and a big focus on that is the exploitation of children and human trafficking. My best friend was a prostitute. She passed away when I was 18 years old from heroin addiction and prostitution, so I have firsthand experience with the diverse difference on how being prostituted, pimped out, especially on the streets directly. There's no choice. You don't have access to money. You're lucky if you eat, get to shower, get to sleep, all of that. You're put on drugs, and then sex workers, it's a choice. You do an I-9 or whatever, and
What's that?
you pay taxes on your OnlyFans money, and like you get to choose like buying yachts and traveling the world and like eating food and having nice stuff. So I think there's a huge difference on like being a sex worker and OnlyFans model and having a choice. And then there's also that middleman of the escort, where that person is still most of the time pimped or working for a business, but they have far more access to their money. And I just think that's the difference of like your rights as like a prostitute, being on the streets, working out of hotels and motels, and then also the being online or being a stripper too. It's like most of those people have access to their money in prostitutes. So that's basically it. So.
I think, okay, so I listened to what you had to say, but here's my counter.
Please give it to me.
You're just redefining what prostitute is because you want to make a delineation because sex worker sounds, thank you, at least socially less bad, less impactful.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's really what you're doing. You're just redefining terms, even though, no, you're wrong.
They're defined legally too. They're defined legally. Like they changed those laws in most cities.
They're defined legally
to protect prostitutes.
Yeah, but prostitution's a universal term. It's not just a localized one. So whether or not we locally define it a different way than, Venezuela or whatever, universalization of the term is not really in question. If you have sex with a man in exchange for money, you're a prostitute. Or if you do it in exchange for goods or in exchange for services, you're a prostitute.
But most OnlyFans models do solo work. Like you do mostly solo
So
work
if
and only do work with your husband. So how could she be you know what I mean?
Let me help you out. If a woman, right, goes up into a hotel room, okay, and she gets naked, and a guy jerks off to her naked while she's playing with herself, and he finishes, did she engage in prostitution or not? If he pays her,
I would say yes, she did.
then your argument's moot here. Because
Most women these days don't go to hotels and sleep with men, though. They just go online.
hang on. Your argument would be moot if you consider that woman to be a prostitute. The only distinction here is a video screen. And so it's like, I don't know how you make that argument in good faith because you just contradicted yourself. If it's the case that a woman goes up to a hotel room, gets paid money, and plays with herself until a man ejaculates, and all you put between that is a barrier of a screen, how do you not still consider it prostitution? That makes no sense to
Keeping the
me.
money or giving it to somebody after?
Well,
it's like my important distinction on
so
that.
then OF is giving a percentage of money to a digital pimp. I mean, what's the distinction?
I think it's mainly when it comes from.
Well, hang on. But you can't just agree and then still want to redefine because it's like, what's the difference between the guy comes in, your black pimp comes in and runs security, and he has a toothpick in his hand? He looks like he's wearing a suit similar to this, and he comes in and he has a toothpick in his mouth, and he's like, hey man, I'm a pimp named Slickback, and you got to give me $30 of the $100 you just made because I was outside making sure nobody came in here and bothered you.
You piqued my
and the
curiosity.
prostitute gives him $30, and out he goes. What's the difference between that and her just having 30% automatically deducted from what she made to the digital pimp? What the fuck is the difference?
Wait, how would you define prostitution? Because no one's defined the term, and so
I did define it. I would consider prostitution to be sexual favors, right? Or selling sexual services in exchange for profit or goods or money or services.
I mean,
So like, hey, if, I'll have sex with you if you give me this part in a play, I consider that prostitution.
I can understand the argument because you're looking from currently and you're saying like with the technology available, this should be considered as that. I feel like a lot of the stigma and antiquity around the term is because of what it physically actually was.
What do you
right?
mean?
I mean, like, people actually, you know, like, the woman would become undesirable. She would be kind of downcast in society, and then she would get, like, meager amounts of money, and then be kind of physically, you know, like, used by men.
Can you
in a way
explain how that was worse society? Like, how's that a worse society that there's a stigma?
Oh, no,
around
there's not,
sex
but
work?
it's like...
It seems like that's a better society.
We put a
to me.
distinction between playing Call of Duty and shooting someone, right? And you could argue that, like, there's an amount of that where it's like, well, you know, I'm pulling triggered someone else's avatar.
Wait a second. I got to take issue with this.
Sure.
So, I understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
You can have like you can have the digital deed of like I play Red Dead Redemption, and you know I'll like lasso a chick and run her on the railroad tracks just to watch a train hit her because I think it's hilarious, right? There's a big distinction between that and real-time application. So I agree with you that nobody's actually getting hurt in Call of Duty. This is all fiction. This is all pixels on a screen, right? This type of thing. That's not the case here. This is not a digital display. This is a human display with the intent of creating a sexual environment so that men can basically be sexually gratified in exchange for resources. I don't know how you get around that exactly.
For me, the point was actually just that, like, definitely real war violence. Would you call, like, video game war violence? I would say not, right? It's a representation, but, like...
But it doesn't meet the criteria because there would have to be something in material reality which was happening for there to be violence. So, like, if I say cartoon violence, why do I have to caveat it with cartoon? Because we're talking about...
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because we're making the caveat because this is something not happening in objective reality.
Sure, but then I feel like you lose some granularity with the term when you just throw that in the same. I mean, I can understand doing that. I don't see it that way because I think you actually just lose context, right? Like when you go, oh, she's a prostitute.
I think it adds context. Like, doesn't it add the most amount of context? Like, because
you're being reductive, though.
I think that it's reductive the other way. I think that I think you're parsing instead, and that's where the reduction's going. I think that it's actually, I think that my term much more broadly captures what it is that people are talking about when they're discussing prostitution, and I don't understand why like a porn star, for instance, the only distinction is that you're viewing it through the lens of a monitor versus in person. You're doing the exact same thing, though. How's that not prostitution? I really don't understand that.
I think it just depends if you define it as, like, is a male getting off to this, or is she fucking somebody in the same room? Whether it's like masturbation, like said, someone has a cuck fantasy, or they just like to watch.
Sure.
Okay. Is she with the guy in a physical space? I think that's how most people would define prostitution.
So then by that definition, you would have to consider OF models who slept with men to be prostitutes.
I could see that, yeah.
Yeah,
That
and then you
definition
would
for
also
sure.
have to say that all porn stars were prostitutes, right? But
Yeah.
do you see, though, how now we're only parsing out you with your particular type of content? That's not prostitution. Only all of this other type of content is. Doesn't that sound really convenient to parse it out that way? Like,
I don't know.
because it excludes me.
I feel like it's still important though for like the individual, like in the case she mentioned, where it's like some prostitutes, they don't have a choice who they sleep with, right?
Well, I consider that slavery. Not
Yeah,
so
that's
I don't
trafficking.
I don't even consider that to be prostitution. So if it's the case that you're being forced to sleep with men against your will, that's not prostitution. There's no intent there, right? That's sex slavery. That's a whole different ballgame, right? People who
Sure,
are
you
human
could have multiple
trafficked,
labels, yeah.
yeah, they're human trafficked. You don't need to call those people prostitutes because they're not. And I don't think we would. I don't think most people would be like, you were sold into sex slavery when you were 10. You were a prostitute. That doesn't even sound right, rolling off the tongue, right? So I think that we would put that in a different category of a sex slave, like a legitimate one. I'm not talking about the LARPing sex slave shit, but like that would be slavery. I don't think that fits the criteria. Prostitutes have agency. It is true that they do conventionally go to pimps and have less access to their money. They're paying them for protection. But there's many of them who do have access to their money.
Who's paying their pimps for protection? Because most people are either pimped out by their abusive boyfriends, or they are taken off the street. I mean, even here in California alone, like having a gorilla, but there's like 3 different
I'll
distinctions
give you some
between
examples.
pimps, you
Yeah.
know, and gorilla pimps especially are the most
I'll give you
violent,
examples. I've
and,
had...
they abduct people, and most prostitutes don't get
I'll give you
like,
some
give away
examples.
$30 out of 100. Like you give the whole 100 and you're lucky to get a McDonald's cheeseburger and a
Well,
change of
then
underwear.
how could you make the distinction that this relationship isn't a pimp prostitute relationship? If
Because
he
everything is
hang on,
subjective.
if he's getting a massive portion of that money because they're married. In fact, because they're married and share assets, he's entitled to 100% of the money.
Bill, doesn't
So
that
does
depend
that
on,
mean
like,
that
prenups for
he's
signs
her
and stuff
pimp?
like that?
No.
Well, hang on. Let me ask you. Does that mean he's her pimp? Because in this case, there's sex work going on with his wife, and he's entitled to 100% of the case. In other words, he could legally right now drain all of her accounts right this second, or him, right? And just leave tomorrow and spend all of it, and it's not illegal. So it's like, how would that not make that the same relationship you're talking about?
Again, think it's just like subjective and by choice on like who suggested it first, like how mutual that decision is, you know, because you can be in relationships where you're manipulated, you're gaslighted into it, you're convinced like, hey, this is going to
I feel like I'm being gaslit right now, honestly.
You're a hot woman and like you're capable of it. But I
how's
think
this
it's
not
all-
gaslighting? I mean, isn't what's going on right now? You're trying to get me to accept a definition of prostitution that would be one, ahistorical, and B, wouldn't actually encapsulate what it is that we're trying to talk about, what we're really discussing, which is women who are engaging in selling sex or sexual gratification to men and women in exchange for goods, services, money. Like, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about a prostitute. And that matches with a much more historically accurate term. And by the way, there have always been elite prostitutes who did have access to their money. Absolutely.
Those are escorts.
Well, I'm talking in the historic term, right? There's
That
always
is a
been.
historic term.
Yeah, there is historic term. Isn't it called the oldest profession?
No, I agree with you. When I'm saying about escorts and prostitutes, there's levels to this. There's like distinctive levels to like a prostitute. Sex slavery is underneath prostitution.
agree.
Then there's escorts.
But hang
who
on,
do
hang
have
on.
more access. They dress higher.
I don't mean to
class,
be
they get better
nitpicky here, but
experiences.
I have to be a little bit nitpicky. I don't think that you're saying when I hear you say this, it doesn't sound like there's levels of prostitution. There's granular difference between the types of prostitution you're engaged in. That's the difference. It's all prostitution. This is
all
the
under sex
hang
work.
on. This is the box of
sex work's a
prostitution.
better descriptor as well.
Sex
Yeah, I
work.
think it's under sex
No,
work.
sex
and then
work
there's-
falls under the box of
It's
prostitution.
like EDM, and then there's
prostitution-
drum and bass, and there's rhythm, and there's dubstep. It's like sex work is
Okay,
the
yeah.
genre,
Read the
and
definition.
then there's the subgenres. Please go ahead. I'd love it.
Yeah, so I just Googled the definition. This is from Oxford Dictionary and just also off of Google. Prostitute, a person, in particular a woman, who engages in sexual activity for payment. Do you disagree with the definition?
Well, like if I recorded a video of myself right now masturbating online and then sold it to somebody, that wouldn't be me.
Yes, it
technically.
would. You'd be a prostitute.
Under this
I think the
definition,
engagement is where people get like, what do you mean by engagement? Like physically or like?
Yeah, how is me masturbating?
Like, that's what I mean.
Like a
Well, engagement would mean that you're either physically interacting with it, right, or you're in some way socially interacting with it. But I would say it's much more physical than anything. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean touching. So, like physical activity, like for instance, again, if it fits the criteria that if a guy's jerking off in a room while you're masturbating, you're not technically there's no touching going on. But I would definitely consider that, and so did you, to be prostitution.
There's a risk though that he could touch her. You know, like there's a chance because he is there.
Also, they're performing that activity
I'm not sure
together,
that
no?
that's, again, I'm not sure how that would interact with the definition to make it not
because the
engagement.
definition was made before the internet was. So like they never perceived this concept of a man can jack off to a woman. In
They
a
had
different
Playboys.
country
They
while
had
she's
look. They
has a
had
video?
Playboys before the internet,
Well,
and they
yeah,
had
that's still not
pictures
the
of
same
nudie
as,
women
like,
before the internet.
requesting a custom. You know,
I think that if you were engaged in Playboy, all right, if you were completely nude in a Playboy, or a Hustler was even worse, right? Let's say Hustler, so then you can't even use the model aspect, and you have things shoved into yourself in a Hustler magazine, which they often did. Yeah, I think that's prostitution. I think that definitely, like, you're getting money in exchange for you participating in the sexual gratification of other people with intent. So, like, I think the difference between, there could just be a really sexually attractive woman. I agree that crazy dudes online are just going to fap to, right? Or not even crazy guys. Maybe just really attracted. They're fapping to her, whatever, right? But she has no intent for that. That's not her intent. Her intent is not to make them do that. And that's the distinction. And it's like, it's very clear that the intent for the sex worker, I would say prostitute, is to do that. And so I think that's a distinction. I don't think it's that granular, really.
So it depends on the intent of the woman.
Yeah, it would depend on the intent of both.
Both. But
Yeah.
so the man purchasing and the woman.
Yeah, the woman's intent is to do that. you know?
Gotcha.
Wait, I have a question. If there's like an influencer who like posts herself like clothes, let's say, and she gets money for being an influencer, and there's a guy on the other end of the, or like who watches her or like consumes her content, who like gets off to her,
Yeah, the
and she
intent's
receives
not-
money even though
yeah.
he gets sexually gratified.
Is the intent from her specifically to sexually gratify him in exchange for the money in her body?
Okay.
Yeah, it's always going to be like everything. That's what the difference between killing and murder is. He could have killed a man, rightfully so, by the way. But that's not murder. Even if he had killed him, that wouldn't be murder because of the intent difference. He wasn't intending on hurting somebody and killing them because in some way that meant something to him. He was intending rather to defend other people couldn't defend themselves, and so now it falls under self-defense, right? Or it falls under justifiable killing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't fully disagree with your like use of the term prostitution, but I think the reason why like I would be more partial to using the term sex work is purely because throughout history and society we've used the term prostitute to describe a woman who like or someone who like performs a sexual activity physically with or like gives physical sex. And I think that's not as bad or that is worse
I mean,
than
we
what
used
like,
to-
an OnlyFans model does.
We didn't just use it for penetrative sex. We used it for dancers. We used it for all sorts of people who engaged in sexual. We would call them prostitute, dancing prostitutes. Or strippers.
like people
strippers
use-
are definitely prostitutes.
People would use the word stripper more for a stripper and prostitute more for,
well, hang on, in modernity, but you were asking about a historical standard.
okay, well, including modernity.
Yeah, so I mean, a historical standard prostitute was actually much tighter than that. It was like anything that fell under sexual
Then I would
activity
focus
for
more
money.
on modernity and how it's the terms used in
Well,
society.
even in modernity, I think my term's more useful, and here's why. So I guess here's the distinction. I think that she wants the term distinguished because she wants to eliminate stigma.
But I
That's
also
ba-
think- I
is
think-
that-
Yeah, it's to help break barriers.
Yeah,
because
it's to
in
eliminate
order to
stigma.
But what
help
I'm saying is-
people,
Hang
you
on.
have to have distinguishing factors, and like especially in society and law, like they have changed it over the years on talking more on the human trafficking
Yeah.
side or sex slavery to help create spaces.
So I
for
think it's
women to
about
get
stigma,
help.
and I
That's
think that
one thing.
what it is it's an attempt to reduce stigma around activities which I think, and most people I think even agree with me, should be stigmatized.
But
and so
what-
we don't want to change the definition to make it less impactful because it makes you feel better.
Now, I
right?
do think OnlyFans, I'm not against OnlyFans, but I do believe stigma should stay because, again, a big focus of what I do is about protecting and not exploiting children. And I think, especially with social media today, especially young girls,
Oh, it's
they're
bad.
being
I know.
horrifically brainwashed into being convinced that this is the only way that they're going to survive, or that using their bodies online and becoming TikTok famous is like the only answer for women. And then porn is like so easily accessible for men now that it's destroyed their capacity to be emotionally available,
Right.
to want connection.
Look,
So
I totally-
think
that I
holding
totally understand,
stigma
yeah.
over say for example for you, if you went out of your way and you knew that every single man you were selling content to was a married man, and you actively knew those things, I would personally have problems with that because most married men have porn addictions. It's destroying their families. They have children.
Most don't.
Well,
Most married
most
men.
married
Some
men.
don't.
No,
have
that's not
porn
what I meant.
addictions.
If a married man, sorry, I said that wrong. If a married man is subscribed to a bunch of OnlyFans models, he
It's gonna hurt
probably
his
has-
marriage, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and I
bad.
think doing things with intent, like who you're selling stuff to, if you have the knowledge, to know that you're even flying out, to do stuff or make content with someone who's in a relationship and keeping secrets. I think having a mutual balance and agreement and understanding how even though you don't intend to harm a 16-year-old boy with your content, it could pop up on his Instagram. It could be very harmful to young children and to relationships. And so when you're operating in these worlds, doing those things with as much intent as possible and providing a safe service is the most important thing, even escorts, a lot of the times, they are treated far better than the low and bottom barrel versions of prostitutes.
But they're still prostitutes.
They are sex workers.
The escorts.
But don't you think
They're sex workers.
But hold on. Let me read the
I'm
definition
happy to agree
again.
and disagree about it, but that's my
then
personal
we'll finish
opinion.
up quickly here. A person who engages in sexual activity for payment. That's the dictionary definition of prostitute. Do you disagree with that definition?
No, I don't.
So an escort engages in sexual activity for payment, yes or no?
Yes, but I
So
think
they're prostitutes.
I don't like that
They're- again,
definition,
they're
though, is
sex
the problem.
worker.
I'd
I
love to
just
hear
think I
yours.
use the terms differently. I see what you're saying, but for me, it's very important to use the terms
What is the
differently.
actual? So I understand that there's, some women can have pimps, and there's varying degrees of.
Well, escorts do have pimps, but they're like
stop.
businesses.
Stop.
Sorry. Okay.
Interrupting. God damn.
Jeez, I'll just be quiet.
No, you can discuss, but allow me to at least finish my thought before you want to blurt out more of your whatever. So, I already lost my train of thought.
You were saying prostitutes?
There's
There's different
like
levels.
A distinction between
Yeah.
prostitute and escort.
There
This
could
is
be-
why we don't want people interrupting.
There can be pimps, there can be this, and then
So yeah, there's varying levels of, I guess, willfulness when it comes to perhaps even both escorts and prostitutes. But if we're talking about a prostitute who doesn't have a pimp, like, do you acknowledge a prostitute cannot have a pimp?
Yeah.
Into the mic, please.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just getting really stressed. I'm starting to have anxiety. I'm not trying to be like that. I'm just starting to feel stressed.
Okay,
Yes,
can
I
a
do.
prostitute not have a pimp?
Yes.
Can a prostitute do prostitution consensually?
No, and I meant no for the first one. Sorry, I'm getting stressed out. I'm personally ready to disengage from this.
All prostitutes have pimps?
Yes, all prostitutes do have pimps.
So wait, if there's no pimp, then you immediately fall into the category of escort?
Escorts are more higher class prostitutes. They go out with higher
escorts are
class
still-
men. They wear different clothes. They get some escorts get to go to like events and they get paid to pretend to be somebody and all sorts of escorts aren't just like sex workers in hotels and stuff.
But that's what I guess I don't understand. Maybe you can help me out. If, like, let's say you're walking down the street, like some guy's just walking down the street, and this a chick who has no pimp at all is like, "Hey, baby, I'll give you a blowjob for $50," and he gives her the $50 and gets the blowjob, right? And then she just keeps the money. There's no pimp. Under your definition, she wouldn't be a prostitute.
You'd be a sex worker or a hooker.
A hook
Yeah, hook,
because she's hooking.
yeah, hooking.
Yeah,
You
'cause she's hooking.
You get to keep. Yeah, that's different.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
the
I
low
understand.
bottom of the barrel, but you don't have a prostitute. You make that by choice. You're a pimp. You make that by choice.
But that's not
Hooking.
prostitution to you?
It's sex work. And I think that
I
we're getting
see.
the disconnect is your umbrella for it all is prostitution. My umbrella for the definition is sex work.
Because-
That's our only
because of
disagreement.
Yeah,
there,
but I think that the semantic disagreement is just based around stigma, don't you? Like, the idea is, again, you just want a reduction in stigma, and so you haven't. I would consider it to be an ahistoric standard, but that's what I think is going on. I think that the distinction definition is you want a reduction in stigma, and I think it's actually good to stigmatize this stuff. And so I'm not going to call it. And I see this language, kind of like this language thing, happen oftentimes when I'm dealing with people who are either more progressive left. I'm not saying you are, but I do see it a lot, where they'll kind of try to redefine things and the understandings of things to make them less impactful than what they actually are, in order to destigmatize behaviors that really don't align with people's values very well. And then those become like cuss words. Like saying prostitute becomes a swear. It's like, it's not, though. It's a descriptive. It's a descriptor for an activity that's actually happening. Now, you can have whatever definition you want. That's fine, right? Like, you can have a definition that doesn't agree with a dictionary definition, and that's fine. And I even think your definition is consistent with what it is that you're talking about, right? So definitionally, it's fine. I just think that the idea that lowering stigma by just calling prostitution sex work when it's prostitution is just that. And that's where I think the disconnect actually is.
I can agree. I think the reason I focus on that so heavily is, again, I'm starting a nonprofit for this stuff, and the point is creating a safe space of like destigmatizing the suffering of what some people are going through. It's like, if you put an OnlyFans model and somebody who's like literally like being slaved away in a motel for their life and like was kidnapped, like those are two different things. And when you're
but I think
focused on trying to create safe spaces,
I just think that's a bad example because, again, I think even definitionally you would agree with me, that's slavery. double them up. They're so good. It's so good doubled, I'm telling you.
How much
That's
is it?
what I.
It's 6.
I'm gonna go 1 right
All
now.
right.
What is that?
It's
So really quick, four terms, if you can define them: prostitute, whore, escort, hooker.
You say prostitute, whore, escort, hooker.
4 terms. How do you define those 4 terms?
Again, a prostitute would be somebody with a pimp who gives up their money. A hooker would be somebody with no pimp who has a little bit more choice, but they're more bottom of the barrel. Maybe they're on the streets. A whore, I'm not the biggest fan of that term, but that's just somebody who like sleeps around by choice, I guess. You know what I mean? It's like
No money
or
involved.
like a
I thought that
whore.
was a slut.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I guess yeah, those are the same things. I've never really considered the term.
So should that be even lower? Is that like?
That's
is
like
that-
the bottom.
Yeah, I guess I've never
free?
considered the whore term of sex work. It's just been slut or whore in like my generation is like the same thing.
Can I ask you a question? Can a woman be convicted of the crime of prostitution without having a pimp?
Oh yeah, I totally.
So then a woman can be a prostitute?
But that's illegal legally. They don't have as many umbrella terms for it. So yes, when you're getting charged with a
All right.
crime, that is what it's.
I won't
legally
linger on this
considered.
definition
So,
stuff
so
then.
if OF girls don't get arrested for prostitution, doing only stuff like in their room, not meeting up with people, then does the law define it legally as prostitution still?
That's a good question. I'm actually not sure that it does or doesn't.
No, it
because
wouldn't.
it's legal, right?
It's legal.
Yeah, this is legal. So, but I think if it was illegal, then the law would, right? It would define it under prostitution.
Right.
But then the law is defining it as not prostitution then.
Well, no, it's just defining it as legal. It's not making the definition of prostitution or not prostitution one way or the other. It's just saying it's a
prostitution
legal
is
activity.
Illegal, right?
Well,
In
it
most
depends on the state, yeah, but generally
them.
speaking, it is, yes.
But so in the states, I guess, where it is illegal, but OnlyFans is legal, which is all the states, it's a different, the government is presupposing a different definition, right?
Yeah, but they do that with porn too, or yeah, literally pornography too. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, now you're getting paid. You're so like, let's say that you had a guy who was like cruising to pick a chick up and sleep with her, okay, and for money. He's looking for a prostitute. You would agree that that's a prostitute if he like pulls up and he's like, "Hey, baby, hop in. I'll give you $100 and we'll have sex together." That's prostitution at the very
Yeah.
least, right? Yeah, okay. But why wouldn't it be prostitution if he pulls up and he's like, "Hey, baby, I'm going to give you $100 and we're going to have sex and I'm going to film it." And like now it's not like, you see how absurd that is?
Yeah.
Right.
So the thing is like that would still be prostitution, even though under the law it might be legal. Do you see what I mean?
I would say your intent part would play in, and I don't think it would be. Because the intent part, right? The intent was not, in theory, because if they're just saying that to get
Intent
past
part
it,
is
sure.
to have sex for money.
Well, to make content, right?
Well, to make profit off of it, but ultimately the woman is selling sex in exchange for money.
I
She's
just feel like
prostituting.
you lose more by trying to put them all in a category versus like, just saying what they are. Like even adding an E in front of it, like, if you wanted to say e-prostitution, like that's way more like descriptive and granular. Like I know exactly what you're trying to say, right? Where you say prostitution, I have to think like, wait, okay.
So I agree in a sense, and the last thing I'll say on it, Brian, I would just say that I would put this definition under the idea of it's all prostitution, and then within the confines of that, there's e-prostitution, there's escorting, there's stripping, there's this, and I do think that captures the idea fairly well. Like if I'm like, that chick's a prostitute, right? And you say, well, what? Does somebody pick her up and pay her to have sex with her? And you go, no, she takes her clothes off online and masturbates. I don't think that they're going to argue. I think you're going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, she's a prostitute.